In Wrangell, Alaska, in 1979, Carl Weissner had just concluded his day's work as a lumberjack. He and his 3 co-workers took their trucks back to the town, Carl following. Carl's radio suddenly stops working, and the vehicle in front of him gets overturned by one of his co-workers. Carl slams on the brakes and dashes over to check on his truckmates. He's startled to see a spinning UFO in front of him, which prompts him to sprint for the forest. Carl is suddenly overtaken by the UFO, which then shines a blue light over him. He is unable to move, and the UFO soon snatches him up. A young guy called Isaac Cypress now works as a computer engineer at the NASA Jet Propulsion Laboratory in California. He meets with his co-workers Beck and Greta, and the 3 of them keep an eye on the signals and motion of various satellites. Despite the absence of any grounded satellites in Canada, Beck brings up a specific signal that comes from that country rather regularly. Isaac, not understanding what it was, intercepts the Canadian signal's frequency and sends it out into orbit using one of their satellites. That evening, Isaac gets a new signal from an unidentified source. He becomes increasingly captivated by it, but does nothing. He meets with his counselor after his shift. He proposes that in order to adequately convey his inner sentiments, he consider keeping a video journal. After that, Isaac starts to film video diaries in which he talks about his inner feelings and writes nice words for his family at random. The next day, Isaac goes on a trek in the woods while also making a new video journal entry on his time spent working for NASA. Just then, a massive flaming object crashes from the sky, grabbing Isaac and everyone else in the city by surprise. Under cover of the International Space Research Program, ISRP, Isaac chooses to examine the item that has fallen. Unnoticed, he races to the forest where he arrives just in time to observe the same circling spinning UFO. When Isaac tries to use his video camera to capture the UFO, it abruptly vanishes. He turns around confused to discover an extraterrestrial being immediately behind him. Isaac takes advantage of the opportunity and discreetly films the alien facing him. Soon later, the alien turns around while continuing to ignore him. Isaac flees the alien out of instinct, but a blue light strikes him. The media portrays the item as an earthbound meteorite as soon as the news of the fallen object breaks. Isaac wakes up on a hill next to a sea 3 days later. He locates his video camera nearby, checks what he had captured, and notices a hazy image of the alien he had met. When the blue light struck Isaac, he was also able to record how he was kidnapped by aliens. He looks blankly out to the horizon in disbelief before suddenly experiencing a sharp ache in one of his forearms. When Isaac gets back to his flat, he discovers that he can make his television go dark by focusing on it. As Isaac looks around him and takes note of the surroundings, he starts to question whether he is hallucinating. He can make the video camera appear and vanish in front of him by giving it a focused gaze. He visits a doctor the next day for a checkup. The doctor orders an X-ray, which shows that his forearm has a flawlessly straight, hair-thin fracture. The doctor notices that his arm has been exactly sliced, which is odd. After that, Isaac visits the NASA JPL to speak with his colleague Beck. Beck is shocked when Isaac unexpectedly shows up at work in response. In front of Beck, Isaac sets a cup on a table and attempts to make it vanish. Beck continues to stare at the cup as it appears to vanish for a brief moment. Beck still sees the cup in the same location after Isaac explains to him how he made it vanish, leaving Isaac perplexed. Isaac then plays Beck his recorded film of the extraterrestrial and his kidnapping, but Beck is unable to verify the veracity of Isaac's recording. He tells Isaac that their employer has been seeking for him and that he hasn't been to work all week. Greta finally shows up at the lab after some time. She is still investigating the item that fell to Earth, but given the dearth of supporting data, she has a sneaking suspicion that it is not a meteorite. When Isaac attempts to persuade Beck to inform Greta about the video, Beck refuses because she believes it may be a scam. Angered, Isaac returns to his apartment and posts the video he had captured online. His video quickly becomes viral, generating conflicting reactions from viewers. While some people are certain that Isaac's abduction video depicts a true abduction, others believe Isaac produced the video on his own to get attention. A number of journalists and news organizations call him in an effort to use his footage as the basis for a story. Later on, Christine Schaefer, a journalist, interviews Isaac on television. He thoroughly describes his experience of being kidnapped to Christine and the audience throughout the interview. Christine, on the other hand, misdirects her queries towards Isaac in an effort to cast doubt on his account. Many other writers, bloggers, and visual effects directors responded to his abduction video after his interview. Isaac is worried and irritated by the fact that more people think his abduction was a hoax, so he concentrates on gathering more evidence of alien abductions. He looks online for reports and testimony that suggest the presence of extraterrestrial life. After some time, he comes upon a blog article written by Sarah, a young woman who had an abduction similar to his. Then Isaac sets up a meeting with her in a neighborhood diner. Isaac experiences a momentary hallucination within the restaurant during which he sees the diner's items flying about. Soon later, Sarah shows up, and the two discuss their respective experiences. From the oldest to the most current stories of the aliens, Isaac recounts the information he has acquired. Sarah then shares with Isaac the 1979 Alaskan alien abduction incident. Sarah is given Isaac's contact information before she leaves the restaurant. After a few days, Sarah phones Isaac and tells him more about Carl Meissner's kidnapping in Alaska in 1979. Isaac becomes committed to giving further verifiable proof of the aliens as his video is widely denounced as a fraud. He creates many copies of his abduction video and sends them to numerous space agencies. As Isaac is sending the cassettes, a guy approaches him and introduces himself as Keith Auberman, a writer. Keith gives Isaac his business card and promises to write and publish Isaac's honest thoughts on the extraterrestrial experience. The next morning, Isaac stops by Keith's workplace after being persuaded. Keith advises Isaac to take a lie detector exam in order to make his claim of being kidnapped credible and unchallengeable. Isaac concurs, and shortly after, Keith starts the test. Isaac passes the lie detector exam following a series of inquiries. Men in black suits come to seize Isaac just as Keith exits his office, knocking him down cold in the process. When he awakens, he discovers that two white android soldiers are dragging him into a large, empty chamber. Sarah is being held hostage by android troops in a separate room at the same time. Agent Graves, a representative of the ISRP who is in charge of the men in black and the android troops, is revealed by Keith to be his true name. He is aware of the alien abductions, and together with the ISRP, they start to monitor Isaac's exposure to the aliens. Agent Graves verifies that Isaac and Sarah's limbs contain extraterrestrial tracking devices. He then doubts Isaac's skills and tells him to observe numerous things at once. He queries Isaac on Carl Meissner as the examination comes to a close. But because of his confusion, Isaac is unable to properly assist Agent Graves. Right at that moment, Agent Graves unintentionally says that Carl is now being sought in British Columbia. As he breaks free from the shackles and vanquishes the robotic troops in his quarters, Isaac hears this. He rushes to Sarah's room, and the two of them use Isaac's talents to leave the facility. When Isaac and Sarah go outside, they find they have been brought to a lonely Costa Rican jungle. The android troops of Agent Graves are chasing them as they dash out of the jungle and towards a tiny restaurant. There's no other option but for Isaac and Sarah to find Carl and speak with him. They are directed to Zed, a hacker with untraceable internet connection, by a young woman working at the restaurant. Zed promises to assist them in finding Carl when they later come across him inside a restaurant. The three of them are advised to flee to Zed's modest hiding area as android troops arrive at the scene at the same time. Along the way, Zed discloses what he knows about the ISRP officers, claiming that they are a covert UN organization. Sarah and Isaac are having a conversation on the street as Zed sets up his computer and looks for Carl. In Costa Rica, the two enjoy the vista. They both concur that, if not for their current situation as refugees, it would be a lovely place to live. Then Sarah tells Isaac that she knew about him even before they met at the neighborhood cafe. She tells him her tale, claiming that while on vacation at her aunt and uncle's house in the mountains, she was kidnapped. In response, Isaac is able to communicate to Sarah his inner thoughts and realizations. He reasoned that by posting his abduction video online, more people would be able to view it and accept his account. Zed later explains that Carl has no observable records or clues as to his whereabouts. Isaac remembers what he heard from Agent Graves as a result, and he considers any connection between Carl and British Columbia. He then recalls the Canadian signal Beck and he had earlier picked up at NASA. He gives Zed the task of breaking into a NASA satellite so they can find the signal's position. Isaac discovers that the location of Carl Meissner's covert location in a distant British Columbia forest is indicated by the signal from Canada. They all briefly see Zed as he sets up a video chat on Carl's computer, exposing his worn-out appearance. Carl hastily declines the phone just as Isaac was about to speak to him. When they dial Carl's number a second time, they manage to get past his computer protection and connect right away. Isaac tells Carl everything as quickly as he can out of fear that Carl may hang up. He introduces them, tells him about their kidnapping, how they came to meet him, and how they need his assistance to uncover the answers. Isaac is interrupted by Carl, who requests that he deliver the audio signal he received that one night. Carl records the audio signal in his equipment, transcribes it, and converts it to a language. In fact, Isaac's unintelligible audio transmission was a message from the aliens notifying them of their impending arrival in British Columbia in 5 days. They lose contact with Carl shortly after when he abruptly terminates their connection. Isaac gets more adamant about seeing Carl and the aliens. Zed chooses to accompany him, and he is able to persuade Sarah to follow him. The group left on their journey across British Columbia on the same day. To avoid Agent Graves and the android troops catching them, they stay away from public transportation. Zed guides them on their journey, uses contacts to get the three of them on an aircraft out of Costa Rica. Agent Graves on the other side uses the tracker in Isaac and Sarah's arms to determine that they have fled Costa Rica. The agents and android troops are then told to gather in Canada to search for them, along with Carl. After landing in British Columbia, Isaac, Sarah, and Zed board a train headed towards the town closest to Carl's cabin. Sarah and Isaac learn more about one another on the train. Zed's laptop then notices the presence of nearby android police officers. Suddenly the three discover they are hemmed up within the train. Zed defends them by giving them a mask that fools the android troops' cameras. As the android troops check their faces, the trio takes a separate seat and remains still. An android soldier approaches Isaac and stops, briefly perplexed by his visage before recognizing them. They successfully eject the android troops off the train by running to another compartment. Isaac, Sarah, and Zed continue their journey via hitchhiking and eventually arrive at Carl's cabin. Security cameras notice them, and Carl soon emerges with a shotgun. Thankfully, Carl recognizes them and lets them remain with him. Carl turns off Isaac and Sarah's arm trackers before letting them into his cabin. Agent Graves loses communication with Isaac and Sarah as soon as the trackers deactivate. He goes to the ISRP facility and disobeys a directive, reactivating Carl's arrest warrant. Then he gives the order for all ISRP men to proceed to his cabin. Carl reveals inside the cabin that he was previously captured by the ISRP police after being taken hostage by aliens, but he managed to escape as well. He takes the group around his whole workspace, which is crammed with monitoring and contact equipment for the extraterrestrials. He claimed that in order to speak with the aliens and request clarification, he needed to develop a means to do so. According to Carl, who claimed to have been gathering the equipment for a while, he purchased equipment from research institutes. In addition, he learned of the aliens' arrival while in hiding after figuring out how to translate auditory signals to language. Isaac believes Carl can efficiently communicate with the aliens using his device. Carl eventually shares with them the entire story of his 1979 extraterrestrial abduction. Later, while investigating the cabin, Sarah comes into a gramophone. Everyone turns it on as it begins to play music, which causes a brief hush. There are 2 days till the aliens land on Earth. Zed goes back to where Carl is working. He looks intently at his tools and is ready to turn one when Carl snatches him out of nowhere. Zed acknowledges that Carl's collection of radio transmitters has impressed him. Knowing that Carl was a former lumberjack, he wonders how Carl was able to learn about acoustic signals. Isaac and Sarah converse with one another while enjoying the outdoors near the cottage. Isaac gradually gets over his difficulty to communicate his inner sentiments and discovers that he can tell Sarah what's on his mind. Sarah admits during their conversation that she has experienced numerous human emotions ever since they were taken prisoner in Costa Rica. They ponder whether their contact with the aliens has anything to do with it and whether their transformation is a positive thing. Later, in the middle of the night, Sarah awakens and discovers Isaac outside the room. After expressing his gratitude for how they met and wishing her a good night, Isaac enters the room. The following morning, a rumbling noise emanating from the cabin signals the approach of the aliens. Before coming across an alien for the second time, Isaac exits the cottage and wanders into the woods. He, Carl, and Sarah have a face-to-face encounter with one of the aliens and are able to talk with them using Carl's translation tool. When confronted by the alien, Isaac demands to know why they were taken. According to the extraterrestrial, they have already mastered technology, science, medicine, and the physical world. In practice, they started learning about topics that were more important and beyond their comprehension, like the universe's creation. Later, the extraterrestrial shows them a vision of Jesus Christ. As it turns out, the aliens believe that Jesus Christ is a key to understanding the universe's creation. Since humans have the easiest access to information about Jesus Christ, they kidnap people to study them. Sarah inquires as to why their arms hurt. They are shown by the aliens their inside tracking device. The tracking gadget has been used by the aliens as a repository for their data. Sarah's tracking device is taken off at the same time as Carl's cabin is surrounded by ISRP operatives. The alien informs Isaac that since they live in a society where seeing equals believing, his quest for evidence would never be successful. Agent Graves contacts Carl at that very moment to question him with the murder of his father, who was reportedly one of his Alaskan lumberjack co-workers. On the other hand, Carl insists that all he knows is that he saw him in the vehicle the day of the extraterrestrial abduction. When Agent Graves accuses Carl of lying, the other agents use laser weapons to shoot him. When Sarah confesses herself to Agent Graves and flees to Carl, they shoot her right away. The alien now takes Isaac's tracking device off and instructs him to rely on his senses. Isaac utilizes his senses to combat Agent Graves and the other ISRP agents after taking the alien's suggestion to do so. Isaac first completely utilizes his telekinetic abilities as the agents fire their laser weapons at the cabin. He also learns how to manipulate time, which allows him to make his attacks seem to happen very quickly while the agents are distracted. With the use of these abilities, Isaac is able to lead Sarah, Carl, and Zed out from the cabin. The aliens eventually find Sarah and Carl and cure them. They all leave the agents in silence and depart the cabin via the aliens' UFO. Agent Graves wanders about the cabin incongruously following the laser gun attack until he sees the UFO taking off. 6 months later, Isaac writes another post in his diary while using telekinesis to operate his video camera. Following this, Isaac and Sarah relocated to Costa Rica to resume their normal lives as a couple. In a tiny town, the couple open their own restaurant, and Isaac gradually applies his acquired talents to their daily activities. Together, Zed and Carl are presently employed by a brand new covert tech intelligence organization. Agent Graves was dismissed from duty right away after being found guilty of misusing his position of authority. It was intriguing to witness the film's opening sequence depicting the kidnapping. The dialogue utilized in the parts showcasing Isaac's work at NASA was not overly technical but rather understandable to the average viewer. The story took a significant turn toward the conclusion, when several simultaneous philosophical inquiries regarding the nature of the world were made. It concluded with an odd and erroneous fusion of science and faith. Furthermore, it is a waste because despite the movie's 2 hours, not much of the story is covered. For instance, there is no indication throughout the film that the adversary Agent Graves has such emotional baggage toward Carl due to what occurred with his father. Overall, the movie's idea is predictable but not overdone. If the story and plot had been properly executed, it may have been depicted more effectively.